Welcome back to Philosophy and Ethics in Games, the series where I break down the stories in some of our favorite games and ask the tough questions to figure out what is right and what is wrong. I'm Josh Bearheart Hawk, and today we're asking the real Lady Arkham to please stand up in Episode 3 of Telltale Games Batman. In case you missed any of the previous episodes in the Philosophy and Ethics series, I've linked a playlist in the description below. As I continue to break down this and other games, I'll add new videos to the playlist so you can find them all in one place. Episode 3, aptly titled New World Order, opens with the direct fallout of Episode 2's mayoral debate, and we have something to focus on right away because Gotham apparently has some pretty wild laws surrounding its political world. Harvey Dent is sitting in his hospital room listening to the news, and the anchor is reporting that since Mayor Hill was killed at the debate, Harvey Dent was sworn in as the new mayor. In most situations like this, you would expect a city would swear in the head of the city council, or maybe a deputy mayor, a role many larger cities have to assist in running places with larger populations. You wouldn't expect the person running against the mayor in an election to be sworn in the place of the deceased mayor, especially in a situation where corruption is the main focus of the election, because that would almost encourage the opposition to take out the active mayor. To be fair, Harvey Dent was the district attorney, so maybe there was a provision to have whoever was in that role sworn in if the mayor died, but it still looks really fishy. I'll be honest, my first time playing through this, I thought Harvey might just be behind the children of Arkham based on how this whole thing played out. He could say that he was a victim, but that could really be just good acting. It would make some sense as well, as he seems to be running as the good candidate, pledging to wipe out the rampant corruption that's plagued Gotham's government. But political candidates lie all the time, and anyone could see how bad things were and make impossible promises if they wanted to win over the people. And that's something that's important to remember, even as it sounds like it should be common sense, because in the real world we see that kind of thing all the time. Politicians will run for office on a platform that sounds good to the average person, promising to work towards making all of the problems of the world go away, but they often don't actually care about accomplishing the things that they promise. They simply want to get elected, and they know that fulfilling their promises isn't something that they need to worry about because all they will have to do is say that they are trying, because most voters don't pay attention to the actual results. In the modern era in the United States, a little over 90% of incumbent candidates win their re-election bids in a given year, even as less than 30% of people in polls say they view the government that serves them as effective and doing the right thing. This effectively means that people are voting in candidates that are failing to do their job over and over in each election, but it's never really that simple. See, people will vote for who they are familiar with by default. It's easier to choose the devil that you know than the newcomer who might wind up being worse after all. But that familiarity also allows the representatives to lie easier to their constituents. If someone you know tells you that they are trying to get something done, you're more likely to believe them than you would be to believe someone that you just met. And very few people bother to, or even know how to, check their representative's voting record in a given legislative body, or to look up what pieces of legislation their representative has introduced, sponsored, or written. This allows elected officials to slide by without really doing much work, allowing them to instead focus their efforts on getting re-elected and collecting a paycheck with minimal effort. This isn't the way every politician works, but it's also a pretty common way of life for career politicians. Now, to be completely fair, getting that involved in politics is more than most people really have time for. Between work, school, raising a family, trying to get by day to day, and taking care of our own mental health, many of us barely have time to breathe, let alone dig into a candidate's history and voting record to figure out if they are actually doing their job. Most people only really pay the smallest amount of attention to what is going on in Washington or their state or local government, unless there's a big election or some kind of major news that they can't escape from. Even so, elections do have real-world consequences, and the people that we elect have an enormous amount of power over the lives we live. They can make decisions and pass laws that directly impact your ability to feed your family, that get people killed either directly or indirectly, and even collapse the world we know it with a few seemingly small decisions. This is something that shouldn't be taken lightly. and something that deserves at least a little bit of time and energy above just going to the polls on election day and voting for the candidate you're most familiar with, or who represents the party you like best. In Harvey Dent's case, he did seem to really have Gotham's best interest in mind, but as this is a game about Batman and not a political thriller about taking down corruption by passing the right laws, we'll step out of the political arena and back into the streets of Gotham, where someone is signaling the need for the Caped Crusader. Police Chief Gordon has devised a unique method for calling Batman when he needs to speak to him. And while I know the bat signal is a huge part of the lore, I have to take just a moment here to call out its massive limitations just to make myself feel a little bit better. The only time a spotlight with a giant bat silhouette would realistically work would be when it is both nighttime and cloudy. Meaning that if Gordon needs to talk to Batman, he has to wait for the weather to be at least a little bad. Now, maybe Gotham is just always dark and cloudy, but most real cities have varying weather, and in a city like New York, for instance, Gordon might have to wait days or even weeks at a time to get the right conditions to light up the signal. I'm just saying, maybe Batman should just wear a pager or something rather than forcing the police to rely on a device that only works under these very specific circumstances. With that out of my system, we can move on to the actual point of the conversation, because apparently the police force is stretched thin, and they need Batman's help to either assist Officer Montoya, the one who shot Falcone, or to protect Harvey Dent, who's insisted on checking out of the hospital early and ditching his police protection on his way to his acceptance speech. In this situation, at least for me, the choice was pretty obvious. Harvey had the chance to have his protection, and he opted to slip away and wants to deal with things on his own. Montoya, on the other hand, is trying to prove her innocence by going rogue and taking down the people who drugged her. She needs the most help, but just didn't want to wait for the slow wheels of the police force to move, as the intel she came across pointed to a deal going down on this particular night. For Montoya, this whole situation has become very personal, because the children of Arkham took away her ability to make decisions for herself when they drugged her against her will. Going it alone might be risky, and could wind up landing her in even more trouble or potentially getting herself killed, but I can't say that I blame her for wanting to not only get revenge, but also clear her name. I'd probably feel the same way in her shoes, and Batman is going to show up to help her first. That doesn't take too long, and after knocking a few heads together and helping Montoya realize she might have been in over her head, we find out Harvey Dent is still in some kind of trouble as a voice comes over the radio on one of the goons' belts, telling everyone who might be listening that the plan to take out Harvey is being thwarted by the cops. It turns out the cops weren't needed though, as the new mayor was able to take out the tail himself, leaving him with literal blood on his hands to go with the figurative blood that he already has. But that isn't even the wildest thing to come out of going to help Harvey, as Batman discovers the children of Arkham have been eavesdropping on the GCPD using what turns out to be technology from Wayne Enterprises. Coming out of the world of Batman for a second, that concept is one that we can explore briefly because our world has been flooded with some really advanced tech over the past century. But in recent years, a lot of that tech has been consolidated under just a few companies, with only a handful of them having contracts to supply police, military, and government agencies with things like weapon systems and communications equipment, in a very similar way to how Wayne Enterprises does with the GCPD. This means that bad actors who are able to get access to systems and technology would only really need to access a handful of systems to be able to cause a lot of harm, and puts the whole world at risk. In the case of Gotham and the GCPD, we'll find out in short order that the children of Arkham have been listening to the police chatter and planning their actions accordingly, but they also will wind up having access to a lot more than that as time goes on. Batman sources all of his tech through a hidden division of Wayne Enterprises as well. And while that stuff could be more or less safe in the short term, if something were to happen and Bruce no longer had control over the company, it could spell disaster. Perhaps the foreshadowing there was a little heavy-handed. Bruce makes his way to his office at Wayne Enterprises, intent on meeting with Lucius Fox to discuss the breach of the GCPD systems. But before he can do anything, he's greeted by Regina Zellerbach, the chairwoman of Wayne Enterprises. She's there to let him know that the board of directors will be having a meeting to discuss his future at the company, and I think we can all see where this is heading. While the board is meeting, Bruce meets with Lucius, and we find out that the children of Arkham have managed to get a back door into the Wayne Enterprises systems, meaning they could potentially have access to everything under the Wayne Enterprises umbrella, including Batman. Lucius set the system up so that Bruce could use the same tech Wayne was putting out to give him eyes and ears all over the city, and helping him to fight crime, but also loading a metaphorical gun and pulling back the hammer. The problem with mass surveillance systems like these is the chance to exploit them when in the wrong hands. Sure, Batman might be well-intentioned, but no system is invulnerable, and when the wrong people get access, the results can be catastrophic. This is one of those major problems that I have personally with tech in both fictional works and the real world. To a certain point, technology can make our lives great. It can help us learn new things, find a great place to grab a meal in a new city, and help us stay in touch with friends that we don't get to see in person very often. But that convenience and access comes at a price. When we get online, joining social media sites, browsing shopping sites, or doing just about anything else, we leave a digital footprint. That in and of itself isn't a bad thing, and there is nothing inherently wrong with having an online presence. But we are at all times doing those things with the explicit or implicit awareness that our activity is being tracked by everyone from tech companies, retailers, government agencies, and everything in between. But the tracking of our activity isn't the part that we need to be concerned with. The more troubling idea is when people with ill intentions get a hold of the information, something that is bound to happen sooner or later due to the inherent value of the data. Most of that data might be mundane and not really worth much in the grand scheme of things. But there are chunks of it that when put together could be used to blackmail people, frame them for things they didn't do, or even harass them and threaten their very safety. But a lot of those hackable systems don't start off with ill intentions, with a lot of tech companies seeing themselves as problem solvers. Bruce Wayne, or rather Thomas Wayne since he started the company, didn't set out to create a system the children of Adam could use to spy on the police or bring harm to people. And even the board of directors isn't necessarily evil, with the majority of their decisions likely being profit-focused. But none of those intentions matter when an organization intent on bringing down the city gets access to the tech in question. Stolen tech isn't the only concern, though, as Bruce returns to his office to meet with Regina once more. The board has decided to remove Bruce from the position of CEO, framing it as him stepping down, and this is kind of a double-edged sword. If I were Bruce, I would be furious about the politics of it all, as they are only really removing him as a PR stunt. He didn't do anything wrong, and the board is acting more emotionally than anything by voting so quickly to remove him. On the other hand, it could be argued that having a Wayne at the head of the company after the actions of Thomas were revealed could be a liability to shareholders. That sounds really wrong on the surface, but in reality, companies have a legal obligation to their shareholders, and not removing Bruce could, in theory, open them up to lawsuits and even criminal charges. Before Bruce leaves the office, he's introduced to his replacement, Oswald Cobblepot. Oswald taking over for Bruce might make some sense from a PR standpoint, since the big video played at the debate showed Thomas Wayne throwing Esther Cobblepot into Arkham. But that almost makes it so much worse. It's kind of an interesting dynamic in a way, with one man being more or less handed a life of decadence, while the other had to overcome his parents being robbed of their fortune and locked away. But it also kind of gets to another topic that we've touched on: generational wealth. Oswald has a chip on his shoulder because of what happened to his parents, and he's jealous of the life that Bruce had. Finding out that Bruce's parents were the cause of his more difficult life was likely the motivation behind him joining the Children of Arkham, but I would argue that neither he nor Bruce should have been in that position that they were in the first place. Wealth breeds wealth, and families who have been able to establish wealth tend to hold on to it for generations. Children who come from wealthier families tend to have inheritances to look forward to, but even before that, they are more likely to get better food, have access to better healthcare and education, and have more opportunities than a child that comes from a poorer family. What this means in practice is that those who come from wealthier families are likely to continue to grow their family's wealth over their lifetimes, handing down even better circumstances to their own children and repeating the cycle. The problem is that wealth, the available cash, stocks, property, and other assets that add up to one's net worth, is limited. There is only so much money and land to go around, so as families like the Waynes accrue more, others wind up having less. Because of this reality, there needs to be a reset point where the wealth a person accrued during their lifetime is put back into the pool so others can have a chance to thrive. If the majority of the billions of dollars in wealth, including a mansion and a company, that was given to Bruce by his parents had instead been delivered back into the system, there would be more to go around for people like Oswald Cobblepot. That's not to say that Bruce should have lost everything when his parents died, but arguing that Bruce, or anyone else for that matter, deserves to have everything his father and mother earned is like saying that some people in the 200-meter dash in the Olympics deserve to start at the 199-meter mark, while the others start 100 meters behind the normal start line, and still calling it a fair race. All of that aside, we're going to breeze through a few parts of the episode here because there aren't a lot of points to touch on in the second half that we haven't already talked about. Bruce meets with Mayor Dent, and we get a preview of the new mayor's ideas about how he might handle the children of Arkham, as well as a slip of the mask as he reveals a second personality for a moment near the end of the discussion. Leaving the mayor's office, Batman meets up with Vicky Vale to find out how she managed to score an exclusive interview with Lady Arkham. To be honest, I kind of missed this initially, but the more I think about it, the more her interview with Lady Arkham reminds me of how Peter Parker manages to get exclusive photos of Spider-Man. Vicky gives Batman an address where she and Lady Arkham met for their interview, and he seems rather surprised at how quiet the place is when he arrives. To be fair, the building is a monorail terminal and he shows up after hours, so it shouldn't really be that surprising on the surface. After all, it's not likely someone like Lady Arkham would have actually met with a reporter in her own living room or anything. It turns out, however, the children of Arkham are planning some kind of biological attack on the city, having manufactured enough of the drug that they used on the mayoral candidates and Officer Montoya to dose a large number of people all at once. They're going to use the city's monorail system as a delivery method, but that just seems so amateurish. Like, come on, guys, I had so much hope for you, and now you're just acting like stereotypical evil villains? What is this, a Bond movie? Anyway, Batman thwarts the plan, but not before it's revealed that Catwoman was working with them, showing just how low the ethical bar is for her. To her credit, she does wind up helping Batman out in the end, and to be completely fair, no one would have batted an eye about her involvement had she been the CEO of a major corporation, as she was really only working with them for the money. She takes Bruce back to her place, and the pair have the chance to talk things through before the player is given the option to get a little closer to Selina Kyle, and you know what? Bruce deserves a little bit of fun. A romantic tryst might just be what the doctor ordered for him, even if it is with someone who isn't exactly trustworthy in the long run. Of course, that night of fun can't go unpunished, and Harvey shows up to ruin things as he and Selina were dating. Or maybe dating. It's not 100% clear what they really were, though he seems to think that they were exclusive, even as she's only really been around for a short while. Honestly, this is probably at least a little on Selina, as she might not have made her feelings clear to him. But she doesn't seem like she was really that into Harvey, based on the conversation that she and Bruce had the night before and her overall actions around him. The one lesson that we can take from this interaction, now that I think of it, is how important it is to be honest with both yourself and anyone you are in a relationship with about how you feel toward them. If you aren't happy or aren't serious, don't drag things out. Just be straightforward and honest, even when that might be tough to do, and don't lead people on. That being said, Harvey isn't exactly happy about seeing his supposed girlfriend and his friend hanging out with barely any clothes on in her apartment, and some angry words are exchanged before Harvey ultimately has another mental break, with a split personality showing up again before he storms off. Selina decides that she can't stick around her apartment after that, worried that Harvey might return with ill intentions, and my first thought was how she and Bruce could link up as partners in crime fighting if nothing else. And what better way to do that than to offer her a place to stay in the palace known as Wayne Manor? She says she'll think about it, but before the episode winds down, we have one more huge moment as Bruce has to attend a press conference to officially announce his resignation from Wayne Enterprises. That might not be a big deal, except that we get the chance to either go along with the script as it was written, or go in a different direction and call out Cobblepot for his actions. I tried to walk a fine line with this part because I didn't want to come off as a conspiracy theorist in the eyes of the media, but I also can't stand to see injustices like this go unchecked. That plan didn't go great, as Bruce announcing that Cobblepot was a member of the Children of Arkham got some odd looks to say the least. But my biggest hope was that the truth would eventually come out, and if I walked just the right line, Bruce would wind up coming out a little better on the other side. Of course, we won't know the full damage in this episode, as the credits roll shortly after the speech, but just before that happens, we bump into Vicky Vale once again, as she stabs Bruce in the hand with a fake pin, injecting him with the drugs the Children of Arkham have been using, and reveals that she is Lady Arkham. The drugs cause Bruce to go nuts, and within a couple of moments, he's beating the hell out of Oswald, and the credits are finally rolling. This was definitely a roller coaster of a ride, and with only 2 episodes left, it's going to be interesting to see how things turn out in the end. To make sure you don't miss out on what happens next, make sure you like the video and subscribe to Lost in Games on YouTube. I release new philosophy and ethics in games videos every Thursday, and you aren't going to want to miss what I've got coming down the pipe as we cover games like Cyberpunk 2077 and Assassin's Creed Black Flag in the coming months. If you want to help the channel out in other ways, I've got a channel membership program and a Patreon where you can chip in a couple of bucks a month to help me get new games to cover while getting early access to videos and your name on the screen. That's all I've got for this one. I want to thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.